Welcome back to another Fantasy Football Predictive Analytics podcast with Rhys Tiller and our good friend, Rich Hribar. Rich, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. 18 weeks are down. We made it. We survived. Now we get to have kind of just enjoy the football games. Not that we didn't enjoy them when we were sweating the fantasy season, the regular season, but this is always kind of just like the icing on the cake. We'll play some DFS, we'll get in some playoff pools and have some fun with it. But we get to just enjoy football, the rest of the way out.
Yes. How did your teams do?
I did good, pretty solid. I ended up winning, three of my leagues. I won a couple of dynasty best ball leagues too. I don't think your dad is in the one. Ryan McDowell runs it. But we did pretty good. I had my best DFS season ever. So my wife was pretty happy. She's already spent some of the money. So it was pretty solid year. How'd you do?
I'm only in two leagues. I'm one of them.
That's
They're both
right.
like small family leagues. I'm not quite into the Ryan McDowell leagues yet.
Rhys doesn't realize, like, those kitchen sink leagues are hard, and some of the brightest guys in the world are in these, and to do well is hard. I mean, like, it's not easy, and it's a huge step up from those Yahoo redraft leagues with 8 or 10 teams.
I'm in all five of them, and I only have one championship.
I have a few, and I had some bad luck at the end, and it's okay. Like, I try not to take it seriously, and made some good trades, made some bad trades. I really like three of my teams. Two of them are, Rich, I'm about to say this and you're gonna laugh. They're between, do I want to rebuild as is or hit the reset button?
Yep.
But I have such good almost
Debbie guys or something.
Yeah, the three of the five have both Bijan Robinson and Travion Henderson, both. And I don't want to hit the reset button with those guys coming up,
I was in that same boat last year with, like, I had a team with like Kyle Pitts and Trey Lance, and I was like, I'm not throwing those guys back.
No, it's too risky. And but like, do you just sit there and stomach it until those guys come out, or
right,
or whatever it is? But yeah, it's all good.
That's almost like how the Broncos are every year. We can't ever decide, and the Falcons are the same about. We can't decide whether we want to get a good pick or make the playoffs. So we do neither.
You just stay in limbo.
Yes. So we win like our first 2 or 3 games. We go on a bad losing streak, and then we win some at the end that push us back in the draft once we're already eliminated. It's very annoying. So every year we learn stuff. Something's good, something's bad. What worked, what didn't. What worked for you?
I mean, what worked for me, I think, is that's still like tried and true. If you're talking just redraft, not in the dynasty stance, but just staying like true to your structured drafts. I think, we want to look at these anchor running backs and the positional leverage they provide, but then you also want to kind of get out of the running back position through like kind of the middle rounds. I mean, it was another like terrible year for like the air quotes RB dead zone. Hayden Winks put out some information on that, at the tail end of the season, like how, running backs performed like rounds 3 through 7. And once again, it was just a trap. And, it's not always about, who you draft. It's sometimes about who you don't draft too. And, just dodging those landmines could put you on to some of the players that hit in those areas like Deebo Samuel and Cooper Kupp. You may not even been onto those guys, but if you're drafting the right positions in those areas, you just accidentally will fall onto some of those guys. But it was another tough year for, that mid like tweener running back kind of equity. You're better off just getting an anchor guy at the top and then just throwing a bunch of pieces at the wall. And then you see at the end of the season, these guys that, come and hit and win leagues, guys like Sony Michel and, even Rex Burkhead had that awesome week 17 or week 16. Just a lot of dynasty ghosts this year really impacted. Zay Jones, Laquan Treadwell, all these guys from the past that just came back and like Deontay Foreman, Rashad Penny, all these guys just came out of the graves and helped a lot of people win fantasy championships this year.
Yes. And I liked how you said how some people just got lucked into certain picks, because going into the year, there's no way to tell whether it was going to be Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk. And people who are disappointed about missing out on Ayuk, who was going probably 6 or 7 picks above Debo Samuel, got pretty lucky drafting, the eventual wide receiver 2 and running back 24. And then, well, I don't know if he officially got the running back designation, but he still ran for a lot of yards. And
I
people,
mean, about the year Debo Samuel had, if it wasn't for Cooper Kupp just like kind of approaching all these records, I mean, he'd have a really good claim to Offensive Player of the Year, especially for his versatility. He ended up 5th in the NFL in receiving yards and was 43rd in routes run.
Yeah.
He had a pretty special year.
oh yeah,
And Rich, I want to ask you 2 questions, if I may. Does Trey Lance being under center possibly next year help or hurt Debo? A, and you mentioned the anchor running backs. How many or which running backs at the top do you next year consider anchor? Because I think that list is shrinking, without Zeke and Barkley and all those guys. So do you like Samuel going up or down next year? And who are those anchor running backs for you?
Well, one of the I think we have to expect Samuel to at least efficiency wise to drop what he did this year.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons I was into him this year and was a little more hesitant on Ayuk is that I thought Debo Samuel, the way they use him, is a little bit more quarterback proof than how Ayuk is used. You get those freebie touches in the run game. You get those short, passes and stack that yak. So I still think he'll be okay. There will be recoil off this type of efficiency. There always is. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to watch the 49ers and the conversation around them, this off season, the way with us finally expecting Lance to take over. But the weaponry is there. I mean, this is a team that it could also be a rocket ship, right? Like there's also an element like, what if Lance is that good coming now, having a year of the NFL, and he could take this offense even higher because George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel, Elijah Mitchell, maybe Trey Sermon does something, maybe Raheem Mostert comes back. There's a lot of talent on this offense. So maybe it just keeps ascending though. We just want to have attachment to it. The running backs are tougher because, like you said, it's shrinking. One of the things I was real curious coming into this season with the added week, the added game was, would we see a bunch of running backs like get extra touches this year? And that really didn't happen. I mean, we had Najee lead the league in touches. Derrick Henry was pacing to have more than him, but we didn't have like all these 300 touch running backs, right? It still didn't happen, even with the extra game. So yeah, I mean, it's still like largely committee-based running backs. We don't have a lot of guys playing all 3 downs, locked into kind of these roles. Even the good fantasy backs, like think of the year Joe Mixon had. He still wasn't even a full 3-down player. I mean, Samaj Piran still playing a lot of passing down work towards like the whole back half of the season. You have guys like DeAndre Swift shared time. We have very few. Nick Chubb has been an excellent running back his whole NFL career, and still, it is kind of frozen out of passing down snaps. We just have all these compartmentalized players, and we have very few 3-down alpha workhorse running backs left in the NFL.
Yeah,
but even Jonathan Taylor, they signed Naheem Hines to an $18 million extension last offseason, I believe. Might have been in season, and that proves bad for Taylor's workload for obvious reasons, with his passing game work expected to go down except off fluke plays.
Yeah, he had a few great receiving games, Taylor did, but you're right, it does lower the ceiling some of them. And Rich, let me add one more to it. Eckler, anybody that has Eckler on a fantasy team wishes that dude had more touches because he's so dynamic. And you're sitting there and you watch Justin Jackson wander around, you're like, man, Eckler could have made 3 plays for that. And it is scary.
Yes. But you were talking about San Francisco and all the weapons they had. Correct me if I'm trying to think of any other team, but has any quarterback in the past decade or so lucked into such a great situation? Smart head coach, great weapons, strong defense, pretty good offensive line.
Dak with Jason Garrett at coach. No, I'm joking. But I mean, he did have Zeke, and he's got the weapons. But
it's trending that way for Burrow, man. He didn't like necessarily walk into it, but all the pieces in Cincinnati with them taking Chase, and they took T. Higgins in the same draft. Mixon's on an extension. We have to figure they're going to add offensive linemen now. The Bengals are definitely in a position to where they could definitely be really scary move forward. Plus, Tyler Boyd's a really solid wide receiver 3. They're really kind of set up for Burrow's rookie contract here. I'm really curious to see how far, if they make a run this season. Because if they win and the Bills win, it's definitely possible the Bengals could beat the Titans. So I'm real curious to see how this plays out, the AFC playoffs for sure, and how the Bengals roll this thing out.
Oh yeah. Especially because the Chiefs, everybody talks them up, but all 3 other division winners from the AFC have beaten the Chiefs this season. So there is that cause for concern.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Chiefs aren't quite the boogeyman they were the previous 2 years. I think people definitely are still cognizant that they're right up there, the top teams, but they're not like as scary, it feels like, to everybody else. You talked about some of the losses, and defensively, it's still just a really poor defense. If they don't get all those turnovers, because they had a stretch towards the end of the season where they just ripped off multiple turnovers, 7 straight games. And then you see when they don't get turnovers, against the Bengals, this is still an exploitable defense. It's still the weakest part of that team. And when you play some of these playoff teams where they don't turn the ball over, I mean, we could still see the Chiefs defense be a problem. I don't think we'll see it be a problem this week, but it definitely could be as early as next week if they're playing the Bills, really come back and haunt them again.
So who do you think makes it to the AFC Championship game?
I think the Bills are the best team in the NFL, period. I do kind of hate the spot for them to open up against the Patriots, especially if there's bad weather. We have to wait and see. It's supposed to be really cold, but doesn't wind's going to really be a factor, or precipitation. It looks like it's just going to be bone cold, just 0 degrees, extreme wind chill in Buffalo at night. So that game just depends on, if the Bills can get ahead and force the Patriots to have to rely on dropping back to pass more than they want, and that, that pass rush is able to get home on Mac Jones like it was in the second matchup. I think they're really set up well. I think that they're really built to beat the Chiefs. So I think if we see the Bills play the Chiefs, I think that's going to come out to fruition like it did in the regular season. I really, really think that they are the most complete team, in the NFL. I know that they don't really have that power running game, but they've got a power runner at quarterback, and they have the right mindset too with Brian Daboll. If they can get past this game, I think they win. They go to the Super Bowl.
Yes. I would 100% agree with you that they are the team in the AFC that's built to take down the Chiefs the best. And I would 100% agree with you, except that Tre'Davious White is still out. He's really good at shutting down Tyreek Hill. And if you shut down Tyreek Hill with Tre'Davious White, it's very different. It allows you to focus on Travis Kelce, because that running back game's not much of a threat.
I don't like Singletary. I don't like Moss. I don't like.
Yeah. We're talking about the Chiefs.
Oh,
right?
Chiefs. Do you like Gore, Rich?
I mean, he's not really going to touch the ball in the playoffs, I don't think.
I would love for him to, man. I like him better than I do Williams, but that's me.
Yeah, I mean, Williams has the safety net of where he's got all that passing down work and the trust in the pass game. Neither guy is, between him and Allaire, electric as a runner. I think both of their long runs are under 25 yards, both players on the season. So you're not getting explosive runs out of either guy, but Daryl's a complete ham and egger, right? He doesn't do really anything great, but doesn't he just does what Andy Reid wants and doesn't make mistakes. And that's why I think he gets kind of the work he does, but he's not electric on his own by any means. But that's why we talk about running backs kind of being fungible, and not invest in that equity. I mean, the Chiefs, they the way they built this roster, we have to look back on that Clyde Edwards-Helaire pick. We thought many people considered that a luxury at the time, but now that we have some hindsight and some separation from it, man, there's a lot of picks they could have made that would have really helped this roster a lot more.
JT. Imagine Taylor on that team. Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, he went ahead of even other running backs, even if they took a running back.
That's what I'm saying.
DK Metcalf. Imagine DK Metcalf on this roster.
All right, I want to redirect you, Rich. So you like Buffalo? Do you like Buffalo versus Tennessee or Kansas City? Or are you just dismissing Tennessee?
I'm not dismissing them, because you look at their wins. They've beaten a lot of the top teams. I do think that when it comes to a rematch, though, I mean, they have still enough flaws, obviously in pass protection. How many explosive plays can they create? I mean, they were last in the NFL in plays of 20 or more yards created. Also, their secondary still kind of scares me if they have to run the gauntlet of facing all these good pass games in a row. I think one of them probably gets them. But I don't think we can dismiss them. I mean, their body of work is really solid. I think Vrabel did a really good job based on the amount of injuries they had. I do like some teams more than them, heads up, but we can't ignore them at all.
In a cold weather game, I just thought they would have a better chance at Buffalo than Kansas City, I think. Like if Derrick Henry gets on a roll, I think they would have a better chance against Buffalo than, let's say, Kansas City. Because Kansas City gets up on them and they can't go toe to toe. That's just my view.
They worked Kansas City over pretty good earlier in the season. Yeah. We've seen that they ran the ball well without Derrick Henry. Like losing Derrick Henry wasn't like a big thing for them. I mean, there's a talent gap between him and Deontay Foreman, but they had tons of production rushing the football still with him out. So I mean, we've seen guys like AJ Brown mean a lot more when he's out of the lineup to how efficient that offense can be.
And they have Julio back, and I don't know. Those Derrick Henry 200-yard games in the playoffs is what I keep going back to. Like he has a chance to carry them one game, maybe not two.
Yeah, I don't know what did have any expectations for him, right? Like coming off the Jones fracture, like how much will he play? Will he be Derrick Henry? A lot of questions still around that.
Yeah.
What do you think about Deontay Foreman? Are like him having a future now? With him and Rashad Penny, we talked about some of those guys. Who do you think like latches on, or was just a flash in the pan out of those guys?
I think Penny's here to stay because Carson with that injury, I don't know if Carson's coming back. But for redraft, I'm afraid that Penny's going to go in that dead zone, or he's going to get pushed up, and like we've seen him for what 3-4 games stretch or something. I mean, it's not enough to go, okay, I'm going to take him over DK Metcalf or whatever, the appropriate receiver that he'd go in front of.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I just don't know, because Penny has looked good, but will Russ be there in the offseason? Will, Carroll? I mean, I know you've done a lot of research on the Seahawks, and I mean, are they going to run the ball if Carroll's gone? I mean, Carroll loves to run the ball. Like I love to eat ice cream, but that's one of those things.
Yeah. So you mentioned Buffalo as you think making the AFC Championship game if they beat New England. Who do you think meets them there?
I'm very curious. I mean, I would say if it's Titans Bengals, I would still maybe want to throw a bullet on the Bengals still if it plays out. But we know this weekend. Like there's going to be upsets. I think that you can make an argument if you told me that any underdog won this week outside of the Steelers, I really wouldn't be shocked. The only game I would legitimately be floored by if the underdog won is the Steelers. I think you can make a case that for the outcome for the other 5 underdogs to still win this weekend, and we know all the chalk's not going to win. Right. So like I'm very excited for this weekend. We have 5 rematches of the 6 games. 49ers Cowboys is the only one we haven't seen. But I think that all the underdogs are at least drawing live except for Pittsburgh.
Even the Eagles?
Yeah, why not? I mean, that game, they got it within, they had the ball with a chance to take the lead in the first time they played, in the fourth quarter, in a game where Jalen Hurts was terrible and they didn't have an offensive identity at that time either. So we already seen the weather might be sketchy on Sunday, coming off of a monsoon. It looks like there's gonna be a lot of rain. Weird things happen, man. If you get crummy weather, the Bucks have a ton of injuries. I would pick the Bucks. Obviously, I'm not saying I'm throwing my hat in on the Eagles, but I definitely could see an avenue to where if the Eagles won, I would be like, yeah, that this and this happened.
Yeah. But for most of that game, the Buccaneers dominated. They were up 2 scores at least for most of it. I don't see how Jalen Hurts would have to play almost as perfect game for them to pull off the upset.
Yeah, they're gonna have to play a really clean game. It's more likely maybe they cover that 8.5, especially if the weather is sketchy. They're gonna have to find a way, like I said, get some turnovers against the team that doesn't turn the ball over, like Tom Brady does, and they're gonna have to stay within like an arm's length, right? They can't get scripted out of the offense that they've run the back half of the year. The last time these teams played, remember they didn't even have an identity. I think they ran the ball 3 times with running backs until the fourth quarter in week 6. Since that span, they have the most rushing yards of any team in the NFL. They've only thrown the ball 38% of the time, which is by far the lowest rate in the league. So, I mean, if they can muck it up and kind of stay in kind of their scheme, that's kind of the game, right? We talk about the Patriots too a little bit. Like the Patriots want to just keep this game close to where they just don't have to have Mac Jones drop back 40 plus times. And that's kind of where we are with the Eagles too, right? Like if Hurts has to drop back and they have to have a pass heavy game script, things went wrong and they're going to have a tough time winning that way.
100%. So if you could pick any upset that you expect to happen, which game do you think it will occur in?
I think like many, it's the 49ers, right? The 49ers versus the Cowboys. Like you look at schematically what the Cowboys do well defensively, and they've got all these heat-seeking missiles on defense. Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Randall Gregory. They have guys that they want to play downhill. They've got a ton of defensive speed, and they led the NFL in cover 1 usage this season by a pretty wide margin because they want to pin their ears back. But the 49ers have a scheme that can kind of neutralize that speed, that defensive speed, and kind of stop those guys from just kind of all out selling to get in the backfield and get after the quarterback. A lot of misdirection, we got to respect the run game with the 49ers. And if they're able to kind of get out and be able to run the football in this game, the Cowboys already weren't good against the run in the regular season, and they faced the second easiest run schedule in the NFL. It's going to be a long day. And we've already seen the Cowboys the back half of the season give us a number of spots where offensively they kind of no-showed. We had the Broncos game, we had the Chiefs game. It's just there's spots where the offense just hasn't always been as dialed in as it was very early in the season. And if they have one of those type of games, I mean, the matchup here on paper is not super endearing for them against the 49ers. So I think a lot of people are kind of looking at that game. It's the one game too we have until the Monday night game that's indoors. So we don't have to worry about any goofy weather stuff in that game. But I think a lot of people are looking at the 49ers, and a lot of people are wishing in the NFC that the Saints got in instead of them.
Yes. What about the Rams-Cardinals game? I feel like that game's going either way. But I guess if you told me it was 50-50 on which team wins, that makes sense. Each team, the road team won both times in the regular season. Both teams have been inconsistent. Both teams are in the middle of a slump. Who do you think wins that?
I do like the Rams a little bit more, but it just comes down to, Matthew Stafford protecting the football. I mean, when he plays clean football, they're 6-0 in games he hasn't thrown an interception. They've won by a touchdown or more in all of those games. I mean, this offense has been really on when they're not just giving the ball away. They have multiple turnovers in 6 of their past 8 games. That's kind of been their one bugaboo. The last time they didn't have a turnover was when these teams played on Monday night in week 14. And we've also seen the Cardinals defensively start to really struggle here. A lot has been kind of written about their offensive struggles without DeAndre Hopkins, but the last 5 weeks, their defense is 30th in scoring rate allowed per possession and 30th in touchdown rate allowed per possession. They were 3rd in the NFL, up until this downswing of the final 5 weeks. So defensively, they've had just as many problems offensively. So they're going to have to find a way to kind of rectify that really quick. I don't think just JJ Watt coming back in limited capacity is going to fix that. So they have to find a way to get Stafford to turn the ball over. If Stafford plays a clean game, I think it's going to be really a lot of trouble for the Cardinals here to kind of just be perfect to match that.
So you had Buffalo in the Super Bowl. Who do they play?
The NFC is kind of a wild card for me. There's not a team I genuinely love. I think you can make a case for most of the top teams, even like the Rams we talked about. They've been very volatile, but if they are on a heater, there's a lot of talent there that can still easily kind of win 4 games in a 4-game stretch. We've seen McVay get a team with Jared Goff at the helm to the Super Bowl too. So they're very intriguing. The 49ers are as a low seed are intriguing. The Bucks are intriguing. I do think that the Bucks injuries, just the amount of unhealthy guys they have coming into the postseason, may eventually catch up to them. But are we rolling out Tom Brady teams? Not really going to live on that avenue either. And then, the Packers have been this really good 1 seed, but it's almost like we still need to see them kind of finish. Imagine this. If the 49ers win, they're going to play the Packers, and it's like the old nemesis, right? Like, here we go again. We're going to get, a bunch of runs all day on the Packers defense against the 49ers. The Packers have to be kind of tilting a little bit because that's like the worst matchup they could kind of cheer for to have in the second round coming off that bye. So NFC, a lot of really good teams at the top. I think you can make a case for a lot of them. I don't really personally have a favorite. I mean, who you guys like?
You can start.
Well, what's interesting to me, two things, Rich. One, the top teams in the NFC, other than the Packers, are all Southern teams, and they're going to have to go into Green Bay. And I'm excluding San Francisco and Philly, but the top seeds, which is kind of interesting. Like they're going to have to go into cold weather. And so it makes me predisposed to Green Bay. But then I look at their talent outside of Rodgers and Adams, and it's not very good. Their defense isn't as good as maybe I'd like to think they are. And so I do think a team like the Niners could sneak in. But the teams I've excluded are Rams, Cardinals, Cowboys. And so I end up with like the Niners, Packers, Bucks, and then I think, can Tampa Bay go into Green Bay? I think Tampa Bay would be much better suited playing at home. And so not Tom Brady, but just, style of play. They're finally getting over the Antonio Brown stuff. Godwin's gone. Fournette's kind of back, Ronald Jones isn't going to win anything for him. And you're right, the injuries, the totality of the injuries is really a big deal.
Yeah, Levante David, his absence has been like enormous.
Yeah.
We've seen kind of Devin White be exposed in pass coverage since Levante David's been out. Shaq Barrett's coming back, but he's got a sprained ACL and MCL. He's going to be playing with a brace. How effective is he going to be? JPP's been hurt. Like they've just, this was the healthiest team in the NFL. And usually if you do win a Super Bowl and you have a run like they did, there's something that contributed to it. And they were the healthiest team in the NFL last year, the least amount of games lost due to injury. And those things tend to regress in playing the sport of football. And we're starting to see them fight through a lot of star players being banged up coming into the playoffs.
Yes. But the other team that's been like that for the past 2 years has been the 49ers.
Yep.
And they're still in the playoffs this year, and they were kind of competitive down the stretch last year. That just goes to show what a good coach in this league could do for you. Because Tomlin, with bottom third roster, that's a pretty solid case. Is still in the playoffs, going up against a Chiefs offense, and people on paper would be like, "Can we get the Chargers in here instead?" But that's the difference between Tomlin and a rookie head coach.
Yeah, I do think I might argue that Steelers have better than bottom third talent, but having a bad quarterback really colors it.
Yeah.
You take switch quarterbacks, Pittsburgh and Green Bay, and you would think that Tomlin has top 6 talent. It's just Ben brings that at this stage of his career is bringing everything down. I don't know if you agree with that, Rich. I just see Deontay Johnson running wide open, and my heart sinks, or Claypool and he misses them. It's just that sort of thing. I think we undervalue the impact of a quarterback. Like, where's Green Bay going to be next year if Jordan Love's under center? 6 wins.
Oh, yeah.
6 wins, maybe. I mean, I look at your Browns. If they had Rodgers, they may win the division versus Mayfield. Maybe that's a stretch, but I think outside of quarterback, Cleveland has more talent than Green Bay.
I mean, you look at the Steelers in general, and they're a team that just had everything kind of hit the wall at once. Ben kind of hit the wall. The offensive line just basically the last 2 years just decayed. The offensive line's a problem. Defensively, they had a ton of injuries. Their secondary got old and they lost pieces. Their linebackers aren't good in coverage at all. I mean, when's the last time you saw a Steelers defense that was like this? It's been a long time. I mean, they were last in the NFL in run defense. Like, when's the last time the Steelers just got trampled by teams? It's been a long, long time, for sure. And you look at this offense, how do they score points? How do they score enough points to beat a team like the Chiefs? The Houston Texans led for more snaps this year than the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, it's really hard to find an avenue. They're the biggest underdogs in wild card round since they expanded it in 2002. It's just really hard to make that case. Maybe because, like, remember when the one huge underdog that won in like our era was the Beastquake game it's hard for me to even find like that road, right? Like what player for the Steelers can like take over a game and like win it for them? Do they have one? I don't really think so. Like TJ Watt's the closest thing they have, and like you're not sniffing Mahomes. Like it's really hard to make the case for the Steelers.
Yes. I saw a stat that my dad over here brought to my attention. The last time the Steelers were last in their division was 1988.
Have you seen that, Rich? And
I mean, they, Tomlin's on this run where they haven't had a losing record, his entire tenure.
right.
Yes.
But what's unfortunate though, while that is also a badge of honor, it's also kind of put them in the spot they're in. You talked about the Broncos and the Falcons being like in that state of purgatory. It's also hurt the Steelers. Like the Steelers not being a great team, but being like a good team or an adequate team has kind of prevented them from also accruing more talent.
Yeah.
In recent years. And it's going to, again, they have no out for Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger is going to retire. And what are they going to do? They don't have any draft capital to get a quarterback with a high pick. And even if you liked one of these guys, and they're going to be dipping into like this bag of like pedestrian free agent guys.
Mariota. And
I like Mariota for them too.
I don't mean to bag on your guys, but I mean, Pittsburgh was aided by Cleveland and Cincinnati, one or both being down for a lot of years. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And you said something that was really interesting to me. Pittsburgh is really bad at run defense. And what is Baltimore, Cleveland, and Cincinnati really good at? Running the football. And if they don't fix this, it's going to be problematic for a few years, right?
Yeah, I think this is more of like a reset for the Steelers. I think they'll probably hit like a patch here where maybe like Tomlin does get them into like the 500 range again still too. But like you look at just the talent in the division, the Ravens were absolutely snake bitten this year. Like the Ravens are definitely going to be a team I think we all circle to kind of come back strong next year. I mean, at one point this year, they were 8-3 with everything going on. And it's like everything caught up to them still. I mean, most guys put on IR this year. They're going to get a healthy Lamar back. They're going to get J.K. Dobbins back. They're going to get Ronnie Stanley back. And this is a team, too, that also has been aggressive in terms of adding talent and free agency. So, I mean, I would expect the Ravens to be back. We talked about the Bengals being an upward trend. The Browns could be healthier. They'll still have a quarterback kind of issue. But the Steelers are probably going to enter next season with the fourth worst quarterback again in the division. And then, what kind of pieces do they add? Do they make this offensive line better, able to fix this defense in just one off season? There's a lot of questions here, especially with them now making the playoffs. And now you don't want to say you hurt yourself by making the playoffs, but like they don't have a realistic shot to win the Super Bowl. So we're kind of in that dead man space of like, well, what did they really accomplish?
Yeah, but you said that they could probably draft 19th pick, I believe, or 20 or 21. There's plenty enough room for them for one of the 5 quarterbacks to fall to them there. Maybe Willis from Liberty and see how that goes. But then again, do you really trust that versus Minshew, Mariota, Jimmy G, one of those guys? Because I don't know if they can lure one of the big names like Wilson, Rodgers, or Watson.
Don't mention, here's just a secret. Do not mention Gardner Minshew around our buddy Rich. Rich was the first guy on Minshew. And I remember, Rich, you were like in on him even before everybody else was in on him. And if you're the Steelers, how are you not in the game for giving away a 6th round pick for Gardner Minshew and having that backup plan?
Because of Ben.
Huh?
I mean, you couldn't have brought in a personality with Ben. We've seen how he's been with the organization, like behind closed doors. Like
You're right.
He was never going to let a competition like a Jameis Winston, or he was never going to allow that to happen.
But you know what I'm saying is,
yeah,
for a 6th solves you in the short term, makes you competitive, and you got a chance. And but I'm gonna ask both of you guys. Jameis is a free agent, legit starter somewhere next year.
I could see him just staying put.
He could, but he could also be not to pick on Rhys's Broncos, he could be their fallback plan, right? Or, Green Bay trades Rodgers and he's their fallback plan or something of that nature. I mean, I don't know. I could see him staying put, and he was having a nice year. I just don't know if he's appreciated as much as he'd like to be down there.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that maybe things went well and he was playing well and he looked like to be like having a lot of fun playing, that maybe that just stays. But you're right though. There's going to be, I mean, half the league's going to be still exploring replacing their quarterback. So it's going to be wide open again. We're going to have a lot of movement at the quarterback position. It's fun. Because this didn't exist, like Rhys, like this didn't exist like 10 years ago. Where like there was just like every offseason they'd be like, oh, we're going to have like 12 new quarterbacks at different teams. Like this is kind of a newer thing where teams are more willing to move on from guys and even trade stars. Like you never see, like it's very rare. Like you have the situations like we had last year where Goff signs a contract and 2 years later is traded. Carson Wentz. We've seen teams now be more willing to kind of move on. And why are we going to see like a Hall of Famer like Aaron Rodgers change teams, a potential Hall of Famer like Russell Wilson change teams? There's going to be a lot of movement this offseason.
Yes. But to answer your question, Dad, I could think of a dozen quarterbacks in the league right now that Jameis is an instant upgrade over, and I don't think any one of the three of us will debate. And then there's another probably 5 or 6 that we would have different opinions on. And you mentioned Minshew, but don't worry, the Steelers got it covered. They signed Dwayne Haskins.
That's right.
That was just painful. And so when I think of this, Rich, especially in the context of you and I playing super flex, deep dynasty, there are going to be guys like, all right, we know Jacoby Brissett was started games, but there will be guys like Jimmy Garoppolo that's Andy Dalton role this year. Jameis is going to be a starter. There's going to be guys starting games that we have written off, even Trubisky. Like I think Trubisky starts games the rest of his career, not the rest, but he has starts left in him that people don't, they've written him off. And, I mean, if Andy Dalton can start at several games, you can't tell me that he's demonstrably better than those other guys.
Yeah, I mean, you saw this year we had over 60, I think 63 quarterbacks started a game this year. That's always going to exist, kind of moving forward. What happens if the Bucks win this thing out? Does Brady not resign? Does he just say, all right, this is enough? We're still waiting for that to finally happen. Still 44 years old, still throwing for 5,300 yards, doing his thing. But eventually Brady's going to actually stop playing, I believe.
I have this image, and then I'll let Rhys ask the next question. All right, Rich, I'm a big Seinfeld fan. I don't know if you are. And I see Rodgers one of these days, somebody making him mad, and he's Kramer running in with the $100 bill, slams on the table and says, I'm out. Like I could just see Rodgers leaving on his own terms dramatically, whether it's this offseason or another. Like I don't think he'll go quietly into the sunset.
Yeah, I mean, he's already kind of hinted that could retirement be on the table. I mean, he's 38. Yeah. It's not everyone's going to make it to the Brady age. So the guys are pushing 40 now, which never happened, when we were younger, but it's happening now. Definitely could see it happening. It's on the board for sure.
Yes. Aaron Rodgers is that one grandmother who is not afraid to speak her mind. I am old enough, so I will tell you what I think. And that is Aaron Rodgers in today's NFL.
And though he has the people that are happy to write about it. Rich, as we start wrapping up, I was thinking about all those quarterback situations in flux. Justin Fields next year, Trey Lance, Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, Goff, Wentz, because we even saw today Chris Ballard and Indy says, I'm not so sure that we made a great trade giving away our first rounder for Wentz. I mean, I think the musical chairs is going to continue to speed up, that Detroit's going to be able to trade Wentz for a pick to possibly, let's say, Pittsburgh, second, third rounder. And now Detroit's going to take quarterback at the top of the draft or whatever. I only see this picking up because of, and I'm trying to tie it to one thing, and that is with the salary cap and the rookie wage being cheap. If you don't have a good rookie, you're better off just passing on the Wentzes, the Goffs, even the Cousins of the world, even though I really like Cousins. But I'm not so sure he's demonstratively better than Davis Mills, who I don't really love like everybody else does. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of seen like the modern way to win a Super Bowl is to have an elite quarterback or have a quarterback on a rookie contract. That's kind of like the bread and butter. So I mean, you got to take your swings. We've seen more teams more willing though to move on from those guys. Remember, like QB purgatory was a thing. Like when Andy Dalton got his extension, and even with just when Goff got his extension. Now we're already seeing things pop up. Like was Carson Wentz good enough? Is Baker Mayfield good enough? These teams would be paralyzed in years past, right, and not want to move on. I think the first thing that started to kick the door down was when you looked at the Josh Rosen situation and them just being willing to move on a year after. And then you see that with Dwayne Haskins. There's going to be a lot of these situations now where just teams are really willing to upgrade if they can. It may even happen. I would say now there's lower odds of it, but is Jalen Hurts still cemented to be the Eagles starting quarterback next year? We would think that's probable, but there's an outcome to where, what if they can get Deshaun Watson? What if they do want him? What the situation that went on with Tua this year? There's a lot of things in flux with that level of quarterback. If you don't have an elite one, teams are now willing to keep pursuing, trying to get an elite one instead of saying, well, what's the alternative? Like, we'll continue to just be okay here, and just kind of see if this guy can get better, and be stuck in that kind of like purgatory lane. Now we're seeing teams kind of take a lot more action when they have those guys.
Yes. And even the New England Patriots, all those years with Brady, he was an elite quarterback and he was cheaper than most quarterbacks. He was always taking pay cuts so they can build around him, hopefully get a better offensive line of weapons, build up the defense where he's not having to carry his team like Rodgers will have to in this postseason.
Yeah, and even on that, Rich, maybe I'm off, but if I'm the Steelers, I give a first round pick for either Hurts or Tua on the rookie deal because it's worth it to stay down, on the rookie, because he's still better than, I like Mariota, but most of their options. And I wanted to push in on something, get you all's take. I think the reason we're seeing faster decisions, as you mentioned, Rich, is that there's lesser rope or lesser leash for the coaches and general managers.
Oh yeah.
And they're being pressed into show results or you're out. And so it's surprising. Like Houston surprised me because what'd you expect, right? And Flores being out after winning seasons. But I'm trying to think how to capitalize from the fantasy side. If you're a fantasy guy sitting there, you're like, how do I capitalize on this?
Yeah,
that's where my mind is.
Yeah, it's hard. I think more or less we're going to see a lot of more just like focused on the actual like player talent, not like destination, like when guys are drafted, not try to get like super hyper caught up into that stuff. And even in the fantasy drafts, not just dinging guys for like, this is what this team's going to look like. We saw it with Mark Andrews this year. Is there going to be, enough passing volume to go around with them adding Bateman? He's coming off of a down year, and then he ends up, the Ravens have all these things fall apart around them, and he ends up just going in and getting all these targets. We saw it with Keenan Allen the year before that when everyone was worried Tyrod Taylor starting. And then if Tyrod's not starting, they're going to have to start a rookie in Justin Herbert. So Keenan Allen falls to like the 5th round, though he's demonstrated he's been an elite wide receiver over the course of his career, and he ends up being a smash value. People did it with Stephon Diggs too that offseason. So there's always outs here and an upside for those guys. So, I'm just still going to focus on like demonstrated talent. It's definitely not helped us with DJ Moore and Terry McLaurin, but there still is a world that exists that those guys can still take off if just the right quarterback play falls in their direction.
So last question, unless my dad has anything. It's a fantasy draft for next season. If you're at the 106, do you consider, or 108, would you consider taking a tight end with the uncertainty at running back and the depth at wide receiver?
Yeah, no way. And I wrote about this earlier in the offseason too, even with Kelsey, about how Kelsey was going to regress in terms of positional leverage off of the season he had last year. There's just too much like floor risk with tight ends. And you can get that positional leverage, but like I would rather just wait until one of the cheapest of the top guys goes, or just kind of try to run into something and run into a breakout. But I'm never going to really be the guy paying the supreme dollar. I want to use my not have my opportunity risk tied into bypassing an elite running back or try to get the high, floor and upside tied into some of these receivers at that spot. So I can't see myself really pulling the trigger. I'll be the guy that tries to run into the Mark Andrews breakout, right? The cheapest of the elite guys, or just try to get like the Dalton Schultz guy, be the guy that runs into Dalton Schultz.
Well, you could always try to get Evan Ingram.
Yeah, we could keep chasing that dream. I mean, we'll see what happens next year, because like I would say like the tier will still be, Kelsey. I assume Andrews will be overdrafted. You'll have Kittle, Waller, Kyle Pitts, who ends up being the cheapest out of those guys. What happens with the Eagles? Where does Dallas Goedert fit into that mix? But then you saw just like a bunch of young breakouts. I mean, you saw like this year, if you ran into Dawson Knox, you ran into Dalton Schultz, you were pretty good. What happens with Minnesota? Does Irv Smith get overlooked again? Can we keep chasing that dream? Do the Broncos finally get a quarterback? And does Noah Fant have life? There's all these other elements. There is talent still at the tight end position. But I can't see myself spending the kind of like real rich draft equity in redraft, that is, to try to lock one of those guys up for what they're going to cost.
And I'm with you on the dynasty. It's one of my bugaboos in the Superflex deep leagues is I always roster quarterbacks over, even though it's tight end premium. I just don't ever see the premium versus lucking into, somebody else. I mean, like I just don't. I'd much rather have a middle of the road quarterback than, tight end 6, just for positional value, because there's always a O'Shaughnessy that's going to emerge, or, Max Williams had a few good games, or Logan Thomas. I'm always chasing those guys instead of, spending a ton for now. What's his name? Schultz. People want Kittle type of price for him. And I'm like, it's just one of those things. I'd rather chase the other guys. Maybe that's a flaw that you can exploit there, Rich.
Yeah, I mean, I learned that lesson in Superflex. Starting off, could I hedge on the quarterback position and not, everyone's reaching for these guys. You just find out that they're currency. They're like you talked about, like even like Minshew, using like a lot of my late draft capital on Gardner Minshew and Davis Mills this year. Like even if those guys turn out to be average, like they then have value for tradability to other teams that are missing out on quarterbacks or trying to fill holes, because every starting quarterback just has value in that format, where you said it's a little easier to find tight ends, the guys that can contribute, because you're getting a little bit of that tight end premium juice. And you also see the veteran tight ends are easier to obtain than the veteran quarterbacks. They're a little cheaper in those leagues. So you still have that out too going for you. But I have found that it was a hard lesson I learned early in my Superflex days, that you have to pay to play a little bit at the quarterback position. It's really hard to punt and just try to fight back through like draft picks and stuff. And I almost exclusively use all my Devy picks now on quarterbacks for that reason.
Yeah, quarterbacks or running backs. Rhys, everybody makes fun of me.
Yep.
We have 30 roster spots, and I'll have 10 quarterbacks in every league.
Yep.
And like 2 tight ends. And just because you only have to start 1 running back, and you only have to start 1 wide receiver and 1 tight end, but the rest are flexes, right? And 1 quarterback. And so the opportunity to have 2 quarterbacks that are, even if you have a bunch of average quarterbacks and you get to play matchups that week, that's still okay, versus the opposite. I mean, like if you have a bunch of Matt Ryan levels and you're able to play matchups, that's still okay. But you will definitely get exposed if you're starting Fields and Lawrence or something like that. There's no way you're losing 10 points on each player, and it's hard to overcome.
Right. But even if you do punt that quarterback position, you will have to get extremely lucky. Try to pull like a Lamar Jackson of 2019, where he was going like quarterback 14, 15, somewhere back in there, and get that incredible season for that even to be possible in redraft.
Right.
And then your Devy dynasty leagues, that's going to be even harder.
Yeah, it's tough because I love wide receivers as much as everybody. But I used to use all my Devy capital, like, all these young receivers, all these top recruits, it's gonna be so amazing when they finally hit. And it's just the most volatile position. You see that we're just investing in quarterbacks, because even if the quarterbacks don't end up being good, they hold value, at least through their rookie contract. You'll see that even this offseason, all these guys that were kind of lackluster, the Zach Wilsons, the Trevor Lawrences, they're still going to retain value in dynasty. Justin Fields, even Lance didn't even play. He'll retain a ton of value. It's actually him not playing probably helped him retain value too,
Yeah.
a lot in Dynasty. But I learned that the running backs have a better hit rate because they hit the ground running. If they are drafted at draft capital, you can actually play them in fantasy right away. You don't have to like worry about any buildup. We've been a little spoiled in recent years with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. We don't get those very often. Maybe I wouldn't count on that just happening every year. But I learned the hard way to just like, let's get quarterbacks and running backs of these college picks.
Yes.
Oh yeah. And it's one of those hard lessons though, Rich. I mean, I have Justin Herbert in one of those leagues. And I don't know how many players, non-quarterbacks, I would trade him straight up for.
Yeah, right. And Herbert was another one of those guys that dropped that year. A lot of people were kind of like, not like, well, I don't really like him. Josh Allen was that way. Even with the draft capital, he was going like in the late first in these super flex leagues. It's just like there's too much positional value to not take those guys.
Yeah. So I'm not 100% sure. Is Bijan coming out this year or next year?
Next year.
Next year.
Next year, Trevion the year after.
Yes.
And there's a lot of really good running backs in next year's draft class.
Yes.
And
There's a lot of really good players in next year's
Yes.
draft class, depending on basically any position.
yeah, I'm with you. But to Rich's point, even guys like Spencer Rattler that people are off of, he will retain value with the hope of his next destination, him being good, right? I mean, Rich, like you have a Debbie quarterback that I mean, I remember even.
Well, say Sam Howell, think about what he did in a year like this year coming off. He didn't play well this year, but he still is probably going to flirt with first or second round real NFL draft capital, which would put him in a position to potentially start sooner than later. And there you go. Like you have your value in those leagues immediately.
Yeah, and it's one of the few currencies. It's one of the few standards that we can hold on to, other than guys like Jonathan Taylor or something like that. But
yeah, I tried to beat the system for a few years, and I'd realize it was a real hard road to go down.
Oh yeah, and Rhys, I always talk about the trades I won. I want to tell you about one I lost. It was in KS1 with our friend Rich. Rich will not remember this, but I don't think you will. Maybe you will. But all I do is flirt with those whoever's undervalued at quarterback in the rookie draft. There was a guy named Josh Allen I get for peanuts. Everybody's off of him. Rich offers me Phillip Rivers on a 1, which means his contract expired after a year. And I took it like a fish going after bait. And I don't know if you remember that, Rich. Do you remember that? And
I remember having Rivers on that team. I couldn't remember like how I got disposed of him, but I remember having Rivers in KS1.
Oh yeah, and that's how you got Josh Allen, by the way. And it's just one of those things that quarterbacks on good contracts. But Rich, it's been great having you on with us. So you're thinking Buffalo versus who in the Super Bowl? Call it now. And before
I'll say I think reluctantly Green Bay, but I really don't have a great stake in the NFC. I like the Bills a lot, period. I think the Bills are the best team in the NFL. So I'm sorry to curse all you Bills fans. I put the hex on you. I have jinxed you. I apologize.
Get thrown through a table. The mafia, go get Rich.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Rich.
Yes.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Bye.